Thank you very much, Laura, for that introduction. And hello and welcome, everyone, to what I promise you will be not yet another motherfucking Zoom call. It's very lovely to see you all. Thank you for cameras on. I will be giving out prizes for best backgrounds as we go on. And I can tell you that Hannah is currently winning this game. Although Mo's got some pretty unusual stuff going on there. And Imran's got multiple backgrounds. But I have some background game too. I'm going to introduce you to the uncertainty experts who are going to allow us to make friends with uncertainty. So I've been interviewing ex-refugees who've become CEOs, ex-smugglers who've become successful counsellors, and many more to boot. And the thing that's been consistent across them all is not just survival or coping mechanisms, it's techniques and tactics learned in the toughness of real uncertainty and then applied to the mainstream world. So we're going to use the technology in a different way to hopefully foster some of the connections that we've lost from meeting in person and to have a little bit of fun as well. So if we had been meeting in person, this would be that moment of the day where we have lukewarm coffee and bump into people we haven't seen for a while, people we didn't want to see, and make new connections. The connections being everything, the sparks of creativity that lead to so much when we can gather in person. So because we can't, we're going to find a different way. And I'm going to take a bit of a risk on you now. What I'd like you to do is look in the chat at the bottom of the screen, and I've put a link in there. And if you click on that link, it will open a separate browser window. So you'll have me for a second. Then if you click on that link, this browser window will open, which is a survey. And then what I'd like you to do is to arrange the two browser windows next to each other. Now, we know that you've got multiple browsers open anyway. So this should be well within your capabilities. So we're going to move on. Click on the first button on the survey, and it will ask for your name. Should be relatively clear. I've demonstrated with mine. Next up is to ask you how you're feeling. Now, through this session, it's going to be really important to you just answer with your gut instinct. Don't overthink anything. When I was putting the session together this morning, I was anxious but excited. And next up, looking ahead, out to the next year or so, knowing that the only certainty is total uncertainty, how you're feeling. On a scale of 0 to 10, in terms of your ambition and sense of agency, just answer honestly, where are you right now? And now you get a sense of how the flow of today's session is going to go. I will take you through the stories and the insights of the uncertainty experts, and then you'll put your reflections and thoughts into the survey, and then we'll build as we go. So now I'd like to introduce you to the second of our uncertainty experts. This is Mark Dempster. Mark grew up in a very tough working class area of inner city Glasgow, but always had a very clear idea of who and where he wanted to be, and that was the lifestyle of an international smuggler. Mark achieved his dreams and entered into a career that was risky, turbulent, very, very dangerous, and it required an incredible amount of sophisticated risk management and strategy to be the success that Mark was. But Mark had a moment of redemption, a great reflection, and decided to change his career significantly. And now is a in-demand trauma specialist operating on Harley Street who counts politicians, leaders, and A-list celebrities amongst his clientele because the authenticity and experience that Mark can bring to his role in service to others. Mark and I also spoke about the practical lessons that he was able to draw between the two careers he'd had. We spoke about managing teams. We spoke about imposter syndrome. Smugglers have imposter syndrome too, it turns out. And a very practical, tangible technique that he spoke about that he uses regularly is about mapping your stretch zones. And then two things happen. One, this sense of highly sensitive, adrenalized opportunism will begin to develop in you. Mark talks about it as a sixth sense, and this came up in many of the different interviews. And secondly, you do this exercise again several months later, and you'll realize that naturally your stretch zone has expanded significantly. So as with all of the case studies, another point of reflection at the end of this, having learned what we've learned from Mark's story, what can you do to stay at the edges of your own stretch zone? Now, the uncertainty experts have given us one perspective on managing uncertainty, but there is another perspective, and it's called complexity science or complexity theory. It's a new and emerging form of science that's been around for the last 20 years, and it evolved at the end of the 20th century when the Newtonian idea of physics or the clockwork universe could no longer really explain the real complex systems that had begun to evolve. And it's one of those things where it's an attempt to make things clearer, but as is often the case with really smart people, they have a tendency to make things even more complicated. The irony of complexity science is that it's quite complex to understand. There's another theory within the world of uncertainty, of anti-fragility. It turns out there is not a word in human existence for the opposite of fragility. And the time that we're in is really, that's the skill that we want, to go beyond resilience, not just be good at taking the blows, but to get better and stronger from those blows. It's a really interesting idea. It was brought to the world by Nassim Taleb, the guy who coined the phrase black swan thinking, and the book Anti-Fragility was named one of the 10 most influential books of the 21st century. But what we need to know is right at the core of it is it's this, our ability to benefit and grow from the chaos that's around us. And that's the whole point of this session. Okay, so here we are at the end. You've all done brilliantly, and the background game has been consistently good too. So I've got one more question for you, which is to return to this temperature check that we did at the beginning. And where are you now? Knowing that the only certainty we all face is uncertainty, but having seen the world through the eyes of those who've become experts in it, how are you feeling? Have we got some tactics? Have we got some techniques? Can you feel more confident about leaning into the uncertainty that's coming and finding the opportunity in it? Please give yourself a mark from 0 to 10 about how you're feeling now, looking ahead into the next year or two. Okay, great. The scores are in, and we can see that at the beginning of the session, the average of the 101 of us on the call was 5.2, not bad, with just under 30% of us getting a 7, 8, 9 or 10. And at the end of the session, that's moved significantly up to a 7.5 average rating, with 70% of the group giving themselves a 7, 8, 9 or 10. And I'm particularly pleased to see there's no more down in the zeros. And finally now, if you open your inbox, or let's be honest, your inbox is already open, but if you look into your emails, you'll see an email has just arrived. And that's a summary of the reflections that you put into the survey in the session that we've just gone through, curated in a way to provide you with a bit of a blueprint, something of a manifesto, or even the beginning of a map to help you navigate these uncharted waters that we're going into, and to help you be the beginning of becoming an uncertainty expert yourself.